Hi, and welcome to Journey Forward with Jory Rose, where you will gain insights, tools, and inspiration to get unstuck and live your best life. Jory is a licensed marriage and family therapist with a passion for helping people cultivate awareness and authenticity so they can show up fully in all aspects of their life. And now, here's Jory.
Hey friends, before we jump into today's awesome episode, I wanted to let you know about some exciting retreats that I have coming up towards the end of 2020. My fiance and I, Dr. John Schinner, and host of the podcast, The Evolved Caveman, are leading our ultimate relationship workshop in Costa Rica. It's going to be 7 days of pure beauty and magic and healing in your relationship, where you're going to gain some amazing tools, all research-based, science-backed, and fun and easy to learn and integrate into your relationship so you and your partner can be thriving, all the while traveling amongst some of the top sites in Costa Rica, relaxing by the gorgeous poolside overlooking beautiful views, and not to mention one of the top wellness spas I've ever been to. And then the following month in October, I don't think I mentioned that Costa Rica retreat is September 12th through 19th, 2020. And in October 4th through 7th, I'm leading my annual women's retreat in Marival in Tucson, Arizona. Marival is a 5-star wellness resort that even Oprah goes to. And the theme of this year's women's retreat is Journey Forward to Radical Acceptance. There are limited spaces in both retreats, so scurry on to get your spot saved now. You can visit www.joryrose.com. Under the Journey Forward tab, click on Retreats. And now let's tune into this amazing episode I can't wait to share with you. Hi, and welcome back to Journey Forward with Jory Rose. I am so looking forward to my conversation today with Ashley Avinashi. Ashley, welcome. I'm so happy to have you here.
Thank you. I'm so grateful to be here with you.
So we've been chatting for just a few moments offline, and I get so, my soul just lights up, and I get so fired up with energy when I speak with people who are really in alignment, and I really feel that connection with you. And there was a few different points of similarities that we started to come across, but tell everyone what your work is, because I know that there's a lot of beautiful journey in your path of how you've gotten to where you are. And I think that that journey is always worth sharing. Our stories are so powerful. So please tell our listeners a little bit about yourself and who and what you are.
Yeah, sure. I'd love to share. So the work that I have come into very deeply and very passionately focuses on the parent. And it's not necessarily the traditional parent-child relationship. You know, the child is outside of us. It is really about reparenting the child that's within us. So how is it that we're navigating through the world? And how is the emotional conditioning, the conditioning that came about in the first 6 years of our life that determined our fundamental beliefs, how is that determining the outcome, the experiences, the lens that we wear as adult humans in our life today? So the work that we do is we provide transformational spaces for parents to come into. There's a lot of non-parents that are drawn to the work for that reason as well, because they understand that they once had a relationship with their primary caregivers, and unknowingly, the primary caregivers doing the best job that they could possibly do with the belief system that they had in place, transmitted everything that they possibly could in order for their child to live their best life possible.
Right.
Now, what we do is unwind a lot of that conditioning so that we are really walking a clear path and role modeling for those around us what it's like to live from our truest essence, from that core, that prana, that chi that really fuels us forward and says, yes, this is you. And that takes a lot of, as we say, peeling back the layers of an onion, unclouding that which is blocking that light that wants to so deeply push through. So this is what we offer, is the transformational spaces, both online and offline. We have a not-for-profit arm, and in that we bring a lot of people into community experiences just to start with what it feels like to connect deeply to oneself and connect deeply to another.
I think we're craving that as a humanity right now, aren't we?
Yes, very much so.
So how did you get to this work?
That is a big question.
It's never a straight line, is it?
No, none of this is linear, and it doesn't continue to be, in any way. But
nor does it need to be.
No, exactly. And that is the beauty, is the ebbs and flows, and being able to embrace that and stand in the middle of the river.
Mm-hmm.
So I previously, in my almost past life, I would say, what it feels like now after so many years of processing and facilitation, was living a very linear or manufactured life. I was going about ticking all the boxes, went to university on scholarship, got the corporate job with the dream company. It was actually in the realm of pharmaceuticals. I'd never taken medication, so I knew that was out of alignment, but I really loved the idea of being in corporate management.
Yeah.
Something really appealed to me about that. I thought, as a business student, isn't that a dream? So I continued on.
It sounds like those shoulds or expectations was really laying out the next paver in the path, which I think so many of us get stuck on that trajectory. Oh, this is the next good logical step. This makes sense. Who wouldn't want to do this?
Yeah. And you know yourself, Shori, when you're good at something, when you're thriving, when you're surrounded by people that you resonate with, you think this is great, right? So it's reflecting our place in our evolutionary path. And from there, I went through burnout. So I was feeling the adrenal fatigue. My skin was flaring up all the time. I was exhausted. And my output was compromised as a result as well, because I was at the office often till 11 or 12, working on product launches, moving between different offices, Montreal, Toronto, and then eventually settled back in Vancouver with the company. But between the travel and living in apartments and doing late night dinners, just putting the chicken on the greens and getting to the gym and eventually going to sleep at 1 or 1:30 and then heading back to the office early morning, it was going to catch up with me.
Absolutely.
So my decision,
how could it not?
Yeah. And I, in this young resilience, this aliveness that we feel and the capabilities that we have, it's hard to believe that we should put a stopper on it, or we should even take the space to slow down. It's really hard to see it from that lens when everything is going fairly well on the outside.
Yeah.
So from there, I moved back to British Columbia, and my family had been in real estate for quite some time, decades of history in that. And I understood the market very well. I started investing very early. So I came into investment development and sales, built out a sales team. And within 6 months, again, I was at the top of the brokerage citywide, doing quite well. And the rat race continued. I was on that treadmill.
Same race, just different setting.
Just a different platform. Yeah, exactly. So I was still in that trance of hustling for my own worthiness. And that only really came clear to me when I had children. Because these innocent beings outside of me who could actually light themselves up with truth and forgiveness and allowance and patience and play and tears were suddenly questioning everything that I'd come to know or understand or believe.
That part of the play is something adults forget so much. And in fact, it's one of the areas that Brene Brown researches, is the areas of play. Specifically, she cites a couple of studies on play and sleep. But we as adults can focus on, I need to get a good night's sleep. But the value of play, we lose it. And isn't it amazing how our children remind us of these most simple things? Yeah,
I'm with you 100%. And I think play nowadays is so structured for a lot of us, adults or children.
Absolutely.
We're confined to these boundaries and saying between 5 and 6, I'm going to go out for, take my child out for that play date. And they don't really have the allowances that come with real play, which is, how creative can I be in this moment? How much can I allow myself just to rest in this beauty? There is so much that comes out of play if we allow ourselves to do it deeply and truthfully. And Dr. Gordon Neufeld, who's an early developmental psychologist here in Vancouver, talks about that a lot. That rest, play, and tears, true rest, true play, and true tears are absolutely fundamental to the development of children. And I think that this is actually something that carries into adulthood. We just tend to tuck that away in a pretty package and say, I don't need to touch that until, the time really comes for it, which is
Or
what I
look
fell
how
into.
put together I am that I don't have to touch that part.
Yeah, exactly. Goes back to the vulnerability that we were talking
Mm-hmm.
about earlier, is what would it mean if I slowed down and I just saw myself in this moment and
Yes.
didn't have somewhere to go or something to do? What would it mean if I authentically connected with you and looked at you in the eyes
Mm.
and saw what was there as opposed to what I
So hard to do.
to claim is there?
Mm-hmm.
She's good. She doesn't need to talk. Well, we don't need to get into this conversation because I'm out and I'm late for my next lunch meeting, This is
Yeah.
typically the framework by which we operate because it's so scary to get into those places that we've shut down.
And it's comfortable in the discomfort of our life. We remain comfortable,
Mm-hmm.
right?
Mm-hmm.
Even though we know that this isn't working for us, well, at least we know how to do it. At least it's what others are doing, so it somehow validates that momentum, even though it doesn't work for many of us.
Yeah, isn't the ego so tricky that way? That it
Yes.
manufactures certainty and safety and beauty and allowance in such creative ways that we don't really have to question outside of that.
Mm-hmm.
And it will always default to the familiar. Always default back to, but I knew that once upon a time, so let's just keep going with it.
Mm-hmm.
Because to step into that abyss and say, I don't know, is very unfamiliar for adults, especially when we've been educated. We have the work history. We've had a legacy of success. It's really hard to come into that level of humility and say, I may not know.
And when I work with clients around this all the time, and the question becomes, how can I be okay not knowing?
Yeah.
And can we just reside there, not knowing, not having to make a decision, not having to stay stuck, but not necessarily knowing how we're moving forward, and just letting that discomfort just be okay. And the more we're in resistance of that discomfort, that's when we really begin to fear it. Right? But when we're just becoming friendly to that discomfort, it's really not so bad.
Yeah.
It's just different.
Very different. And I think it really comes down to what you've been modeled in the world. If you've been modeled patience and grace and walking slowly through life, then that might be something that you're more comfortable with, as an adult. But if you've always been modeled fast paced, let's go, let's make it happen. And coming from, the last generation, they are carrying so much pain. That's just one generation away that they're carrying such big episodes of trauma, famine, the shift to industrialization, the immigration, the loss.
Wars,
there's so much, miscarriages that aren't talked about. There's so much that's gone unsaid and unheard. So to believe that we can come out of that and then just simply shift that paradigm in one generation is a big ask. It's a tall order.
It's huge. I once saw this meme or this image on some social media, and it was a picture of a pregnant woman with a kind of, the drawing of it was, you could see the baby inside her tummy, and it was a girl baby. It was like women, transgenerational women, familial, and inside the drawing of the pregnant woman was the baby, who was a girl, and inside the girl was, you could see like her little uterus, and like so it was kind of like these three generations embodied in this pregnancy. And what it said was, you were talking to women, you were in your grandmother's body. You were an egg in your mother's, as your mother was a fetus in your grandmother's body. So what would make us think that we are not carrying whatever our grandmother was holding in her life, in whatever situation was going on in the world, in her family, in her emotions? We were there. Like, we were in that. So how could it not impact us? The image, I wish I would have saved it. It was so powerful.
Yeah, I've seen that in a few different ways. And it's so true that these pain patterns that we seek to solve, this deep imprinting, cultural, familial, societal, it can shift 7 generations back and 7 generations forward. And we see it in our work often, that even the 3 or 4 immediate generations that they have access to are being deeply shifted. So it's beautiful to know that we have that allowance back and forward to make a choice in any moment. I mean, the trauma, of course, the beliefs, the imprinting it's not our doing, it's not our fault. But I think this decision to come into something different is our responsibility.
You know, you took the words literally out of my mouth, that this is a phrase.
We speak the same language.
We do. It's not your fault, but it is your responsibility. And so it's a responsibility to say, how can I shift out of the patterns that aren't serving me and likely aren't serving my kids? And how can I make it different for their kids? So so you said you create these transformational experiences. What does that look like? Could you kind of paint that picture for me, and maybe even give our listeners like some, what's a practice that you might do that could help access this inner child within us to be able to start creating that shift? How do you do that? I'm like, sign me up right now.
Yeah. Thank you for asking that question. So through exploring 30, 40 different modalities myself, walking through the transpersonal therapy path, continuing with conscious coaching, dabbling in energetic healing and Reiki to a great extent, I just came to the realization that not every modality will work for everyone individual.
Absolutely.
Not every facilitator will resonate with everyone individual, because everyone's got a different life story. And often those who we impact are those that are also carrying a story that we may have been carrying once upon a time. So we have deeper compassion for a certain populace, and those are who typically resonate with us energetically. So what we came to realize is that our approach needs to be multifaceted. So our deeply immersive programs look very different than our community programs, of course. Our immersive programs are for those. I would start with the Reconnection Project because it is our signature program. It's a year-long experience, and the first 3 months of that experience is completely immersive. Because what I was seeing through all my years and years of healing through my mom for 30 years was that we jump in process and then we're out of process. We see the therapist and then we're out of the therapist's office. And we're right back, slipping into our old patterns without any semblance of community or safety, or I can be this person and express myself out loud in this newfound way that I've discovered myself to be. So we brought in a lot of these little gaps that I felt were preventing us from creating long-term change. And we see a lot of stuff in the personal development world being done at the mind level, right? Just remember this, take these 10 steps and you'll be healed. It'll all be done. And I would say, sign me up for that if you really have a theory around that. But I tried that for years as well. And I realized that it's not taking me anywhere. Because again, the power of the ego is so strong that it will naturally have us gravitate back to what's familiar.
And it's easy to hear something conceptually,
yes,
and agree with it,
yes,
but it's hard to put it into an embodied practice and actually create shift.
Absolutely. And this is why we have the 3 months of immersion, which is done with 4 experts. The experts include quantum energy healers, deep meditation. I mean, they work in the realm of energy as well, a doctor of naturopathy, and a true yogic practitioner. She actually runs a big school here and in India. And she really brings the true practice of yoga forward. So with these individuals coming in and creating a space for process weekly with our members, they get to be in this connection, deep connection with the heart, and they're patterning in the subconscious each and every week. So there's really no escaping it. By the time you're at week 6, you're like, okay, I know that I need to show up if I'm going to continue, because there's really no hiding out here. Once we start revealing, past the mind, there's very little strategy that works then, right? So after they go through these 3 months and they have the one-on-one coaching facilitation, there's myself and another therapist, and we do the one-on-ones as they go along, just to make sure that they're monitored individually as well. If there's something that they're not prepared to share in the group, then that's okay too. But they always have access to a group forum that's ongoing. So they can always share whatever's coming up for them, because this movement, again, there's no pre-prescribed path for it. So we just never know what it'll look like. So we
Mm-hmm.
want to make sure that they're really held in this space, because doing it online versus doing it in person is very different. And there's a lot that can come up that people don't feel that they have the right or the allowance based on preconceived notions to bring forward. Can I
Yeah.
take up that space? Can I be heard? Can I be seen as I am in these tears and this discomfort in breaking through? So after those 3 months, we actually have 9 months of integration.
Wow.
I felt that this was very important because so many take the work when with good intention, but they take it back home. And again, those in their environment, as much as our family is good intentioned as well, they themselves are writing out their own patterns. So it
Mm-hmm.
can be really difficult to practice in that
Yes.
space. So we said, well, if we give you 9 months of practice, we can be sure as anything that those who are ready
Mm.
to get out there and showcase their light to the world will have a chance to, will really come into that after a year of truly practicing their real essence. So we create these very safe containers in which accountability, vulnerability, true authenticity is expressed over and over and over until it becomes the norm. But you very well know that it starts with a deep excavation. You know,
Mm-hmm.
meditation, it's an equanimous practice. It's great, but it won't really get us past some of this deeper wounding that we're carrying.
Mm-hmm.
So
It
that's
sounds
what,
like a beautiful process.
yeah, thank you. And it's been incredible. Like we've seen members come off of substance addiction. We've seen members who were on antidepressants for decades. We've seen members who suffered from fibromyalgia. And in 6 months, they're fundamentally different people.
Wow.
Their kids are showing up for deep, deep connection with them because they suddenly feel safe. So we've
Mm-hmm.
seen such big shifts, and not to say everybody shifts at that level, but they see something, some possibility in that space that they may not have witnessed before so intimately. So it gives them permission to do something different. So
Yeah.
that's the year immersion. We also have a 1 month, which we're launching tomorrow.
Oh, exciting.
Called the Balancing Act. And the Balancing Act really touches on some of the symptoms that we feel as parents. Okay, we're so overwhelmed. We're not feeling like we can ever catch our breath. We feel like we're chauffeurs. You know, this is the reality of modern day parenting is we feel like
Yes.
we're hustling. We're on the treadmill each and every day, and we put ourselves last. We're on the back burner. So what we're exploring tomorrow is what's behind this overwhelm. And then as they continue in the 1 month process, they'll have a chance to explore that deeper. Like what's really going on for me when I feel
Right.
this overwhelm? How can I assert gentle boundaries and come into a place where I honor myself within this framework? So that's a 1 month entry experience, I would say, for those who have maybe been in our communities and are curious, who have done other
Sure.
work that hasn't really resonated with them. And then our community work outside of that is really gatherings. So we bring people together. Sometimes we're with the homeless, sometimes we're adults only, sometimes we're adults and children. And we play a lot. We go into our subconscious through meditation, through deep yogic practices, through play sometimes, and just come into that magic of all that we hold.
Yeah.
And practice connecting with each other from that place to realize that this is a possibility. And that's all non-for-profit. It's by donation. We're really just creating portals for people to be seen and heard as they are. Because you know,
Yes.
so the whole day at work and be in your suit and tie or be strong and steady, and then feel a need to release it all because you haven't actually been seen through all that.
Mm-hmm.
So that's why we've created that.
It's so powerful. And if we aren't able to experience that, then it's hard to be able to show up and be there for our kids to do that.
Yes, 100%.
Which is why I imagine people are being drawn to do this work with the Raising Humanity with you. And this higher level consciousness allows them to not only have the conceptual, but have the embodied ability to be able to see and hear and validate their children.
Yes, 100%. And when they see themselves as they are, they don't even need to do anything with their children. Like the children are already shifting by just saying, oh, I don't have to carry mom's or dad's or my caregiver's burdens. That in itself is a huge weight off of our children, is when we cut the cord from that projection, that pain disseminating out onto them. And this is an ongoing journey. I still work on it with my children each and every day. Like, what is this really meaning about you when blocks come up? How did that feel when mama was projecting and I wasn't really in true alignment? So we have these conversations daily, even at 4 and 5. And they're starting to get the language because they're already so connected.
Well, and this is so many things I want to touch upon, but I find that parents are afraid to enter into a certain language with their kids for fear that they won't get it. And it holds them back from showing up in a very authentic and present way. And in my experience, personally and professionally, if you talk to kids like they get it, they will.
Yes.
If you talk to kids like they won't get it, then you've told them, hey, I don't think you're going to get this. So I'm going to make that assumption on you.
Yeah, I'm with you. Like sex education is coming in sooner. The emotional, the EQ aspect of our learning is coming in sooner. The stillness, we thought, no, children aren't meant to sit still. Well, sure.
They've just never been taught how.
They've never been taught how. And it's not in the framework that we seek to do it in a modern day society. You sit here over a 3-hour dinner while I engage with my friend. Sure, that's not very practical for anybody involved, right? Because they're not meant to sit in a hard chair and look at you while you go on about your life or whatever it may be. And parents obviously also need that outlet, but children, they are already so attuned to the energy of the universe.
Oh my gosh.
Their love for nature, their love for animals, they are already there. They understand the language better than most of us adults.
They've been deprogrammed.
Yeah, completely. Well, they don't even have the programming at that point.
Yeah.
Unless it's come through the lineage, which some of them obviously carry upon conception. But they just carry so much less than we do as adults.
Yes. And that's another thing I wanted to touch upon too is I got started in the work that I do working with kids. And for many years I loved it. And I was both a school counselor as I was training to become a therapist. And I taught mindfulness in schools, mindfulness and meditation, though I couldn't call it meditation, but it's what I was doing for 4 years to little kids as young as 3 up to 8th grade. And I decided once I was opening my private practice that I wasn't going to work with kids anymore. And it was partly that my patience, plus I had too much compassion because my patience went low with the parents. Because I saw I could give all these kids amazing tools and they got it, and they were using it. But I found symptomology to increase because when they'd go home, it would get undone. And now that the kid had the awareness of how they could respond with greater self-compassion, with greater vulnerability, with greater self-awareness, with being more mindful, and they saw it not being reinforced from the parents, I saw it almost increase more anxiety.
Yeah, I believe
because
that.
now they had the tools that they saw weren't being implemented. And it's like, but I'm supposed to trust my parent. I'm supposed to be role modeled by my parent. And so all these tools I just learned aren't getting utilized. And it was very confusing. And I found it very frustrating for my soul that I almost was in so much resistance because I couldn't save everybody. And so the way that I was able to continue in a very authentic way was to work with the parents. So when I get parents calling me, hey, can you work with my kid? Can you do this? Can you do this? Yes, I can. And let's start with you. Because if I can get the tools and the work to the parents, then like you said, everything shifts. The whole home will shift. If I give the kids to the tools, the home's not going to shift. A seed will have been planted for them for later if they can harness that and believe in it, even though it's not being role modeled. But it's been a really interesting journey for me to recognize where my own limitations were because of my frustrations. And where I've now been able to channel that, well, let's work on the parents, and now everybody wins. The parents get the tools. They now know how to role model showing up in a different way. They're not so triggered by their own history and their own story and their own shit and their own parents, right? Like it clears so much out.
Yeah, I'm with you. If that environment isn't created for that child to thrive in, no matter the number of tools the child has, they will not thrive. So I love this because the hierarchy of the parent and child still exists in our households.
Mm-hmm.
It still very much exists. And our physical stature has a lot to do with it.
Mm-hmm.
I mean, if you've ever stood around amongst NBA players, automatically you're like, whoa, that feels like a lot. You know, you're down in LA, so you might see some of them around. But it's incredible how that alone gives us such a position, such a stance in life. And then on top of that, we have all these layers of who I am, and I've birthed this child, and I've breastfed them, or whatever it may be. I've cared so much for you, and now you owe me. Now these expectations are so deeply embedded in our relationship that you can't falter from pleasing me. So children want the love and approval of their parents so desperately.
They do.
They will do whatever is necessary to get that, because their life literally depends on it in these earliest years. And that's something I think parents do need to build awareness around, is this is a way bigger responsibility than we ever imagined. Now that we understand that energetically we're transmitting in seconds. I mean, they can pick that up from even miles away.
Yeah.
Exactly how we are radiating that light or shutting it down based on the lack or the fear.
It's so fascinating that attunement that kids naturally have. I recently found and shared on my Facebook page this hysterical video, which I don't normally share these things because if it's not my own work, we could spend all day just, watching funny videos. But this one was so poignant that I was moved to share it, because it was this little boy sitting on the toilet. And his dad sitting in front of him, trying to get him to go to the bathroom or asking him questions. And the little boy had this very guttural, deep voice, like this old man. And the dad was laughing. And he was, trying to get the kid to go to the bathroom. And the dad started laughing so hard, he started wiping the tear. Like, he was crying, he was laughing so hard. And all of a sudden, the boy's energy, everything about him shifted. And he leaned forward. Daddy, are you sad? And he started to put his arms out to his dad. Daddy, you're sad? He didn't say, like, why are you sad? Daddy, you're sad. And the dad's like, no, this is funny. I'm happy. And the boy, his whole face changed. And he was so attuned to the energy of his father. And then they ended up going back to laughing. But wow, could you imagine if we were all that attuned to the subtle micro expressions of our parents or our partners or our children? It was so beautiful. I couldn't believe it. That little boy had so much wisdom.
For that share.
And, especially as a boy,
they're born
with it. And especially as a boy, he's likely going to get that knocked out of him come school age. Because we know what happens with the way boys and men are socialized, that someone comes along and says, hey, stop being like a girl. And we'll say all this rhetoric to shut that emotion down. And I looked at this little boy, and the look on his face was, I want him to look at me like that. Like, it was amazing.
Oh, I love this. And it happens in those moments of pause, because when our runways are so busy, none of these planes can land. None of the magic can happen. And we assume that it'll just happen on its own, organically. And we think about the terrible twos and the three-nager years, or whatever we call it, because those are key developmental years for these little humans to come into their self-identification and empowerment. So we question all that they're moving through, simply because what's coming up for us is what we've moved through at that time, what really is wounded there that I'm not willing to look at. So I love this, and I think children bring so much innocence and so much love back to our world. And if we could simply see them as they are, by first seeing ourselves as we are, we could literally shift the world in one generation. Because I think everything, the fires, the climate crisis, the political wars, everything is happening as a result of what's starting in our homes in the first 6 years. Undoubtedly. Yeah. Undoubtedly, that's what Children are caring for the rest of their lives as adults until light is shed on that. And not everybody has an opportunity to. I mean, we're in a different world today where we have the tools and the guidance, and science is meeting this spirituality that's always been there but been refused by popular culture of the intellect.
Mm-hmm.
But I think it's just incredible that we have the guides right in front of us. The
Yeah.
children are in our presence as direct mirrors each and every day. So we always say to our members, utilize them, because they are here to serve in such a profound way, relentlessly.
Mm-hmm.
They never give up on their parents. And we
every
talk a lot
moment
about
is another opportunity.
struggle.
Yeah.
That's it. Yeah, and the struggle will just continue as long as we are not willing to evolve. As long as we are resisting our natural evolution, and that child keeps inviting us into that, we will feel that resistance. Undoubtedly, it will continue.
Yeah.
So that's why the teenage years are tough. That's why the 20s are tough. That's why every stage feels like a roller coaster, because we are just reliving what we don't allow ourselves to feel into.
You know, I have to say, when my kids were young, I really was afraid of having teenagers. I was really worried about it. And when I met my boyfriend 4 years ago, and my kids at the time were 10 and 12, and he's got older kids as well, he's like, oh, just wait. Like, you're not there yet. And I was like, no, I don't think my kids are going to go through that horrible rebellion. And I don't think they're going to resent me. And I don't think we're going to have that big challenge in our relationship. He's like, just wait, just wait. He didn't know my kids yet. And my daughters are 13 and a half and almost 16. We haven't had that yet. And I don't think we will, because I see them. I validate their experience, their emotions. I allow them to be who they are. And I do my best when I get stuck to name that. And I find by them being seen, heard, and validated, there's no need for them to rebel to go find themselves. They're already seen. They know exactly who they are.
Because you've opened the lines up so safely.
Because I've done my work.
And said and very much so. And
have just, been able to continue to heal the part of me that didn't feel seen, heard, and validated, and was just determined to break that branch of the tree to say, I'm not letting this pattern continue.
I love that. I love that. So you are living proof. I mean, my kids aren't that old yet, and it's hard for me to even assume how they'll be at that age. But for anything that's gone, suppressed, unhealed, and not to say I'll catch everything, but a lot of that does want to come out through those years, where we are hormonal and we will act out of spite or in the flight or fight that we are in remembrance of from our earliest years. A lot of that does come alive.
It does.
And I think the fear that we even, that society has curated now around these teenage years, I think naturally we are moving through, oh my gosh, what do I anticipate? And that fear is obviously projected onto them, without a doubt.
And what you'll see is as your kids get older too, what happens is parents over-identify with their kids' stages. And I remember when my daughter was in elementary school, and I was showing up on school campus one morning, and I was talking to one of you know what it was? There was like a talent show. That's what it was. It was a talent show rehearsal. And my daughter was doing a dance with one of her friends. And I was talking to one of the moms, and I said, oh, how's your week going? Like, how are you? And her response was, oh, it's been such a hectic week. We've had this test in this class. We've had this test in this class. We've had this going on after school. And I remember thinking to myself, but you're not in fifth grade anymore. Everything she said about how I asked about her, she was so overly identified in what her kid was going through. There was no separation. And so if she took on all of that energy and emotion of her kid's day-to-day life, how could she be in a position to be able to model any of it? Or I always get fascinated at the beginning of the school year, all the parents who freak out and get literally so stressed by what teacher their kids are going to have. And it's this over enmeshment with their perceived sense of happiness, success, because we want to be able to shape it so much, but what all that they're role modeling is how to be stressed and anxious about very natural things. And I think until parents, like in the work that you're doing, heal that anxiety in themselves, they're just handing it over.
Yeah, 100%. And I think it's more difficult to heal the anxiety than we think it may be, because we think that doing that one thing or getting the kid fixed up with the right teacher, checking more things off our list, that's what we've been told will heal the anxiety. Versus it's quite the opposite. That keeps us in the trance of believing that if I just do this, if I just go for the vacation, if my kids just pass this stage and age, that everything will be fine.
Yeah.
We might call it destination addiction or whatever we do, that, once they're out of the house, I'll be fine. Once they're married, I'll be fine. Once they're, I'm retired, I'll be fine.
Right.
So what we rob ourselves of is joy for whatever the journey is at this very moment. And that's a big responsibility to come into. Not make your upsettedness or your lack of fulfillment about something that's going on outside of you. And when my little sister, who's a clinical psychologist, she works a lot with prenatal and postpartum primarily. And she said to me when my kids were quite young, because I was quite enmeshed. So I'm really grateful that I've seen that side of what it's like to try and control. That's all I knew at that stage was let's control, because I don't know how these kids will turn out. That fear comes back into play. Coming from an immigrant family and coming from poverty, that was running my story a lot of the time, was what will happen if they don't go to school and they don't do well and they don't get ahead, right? So when she mentioned to me how many parents are acting for their own validation, dressing their kids up all pretty, getting it all right, sending them to private school, which my older sister did, I was just blown away. I actually took it really personally because I could not believe that was the truth of it. I was up countless times through the night. I was breastfeeding. I'd given my life to this child, so I felt, while running multiple businesses to help support the family.
No wonder your adrenal fatigue was kicking in.
That possibly. Yeah, exactly. Yeah, and it happened over and over and over because the body was really holding on to the old patterns and saying, no, you can push through this. But I'm glad to have experienced that side of it, because I think if anything, it's deepened my allowance for other stories that have gone there. I truly understand why they end up where they end up, and there's nothing wrong with it. It's just a function of old beliefs that stay with us. But when she shared that, it really hit me, and for weeks it sat with me, and it was just another veil that was coming loose in that big parenting paradigm that I bought into.
I just earlier today led a gratitude workshop. And one of the things that I always go back to this example of was years ago, I was leading a mindful parenting class. And there was this mom who had said, my mindfulness practice is really, really good. I can be present. I can be responsive. I can allow and accept what's arising. I can come into compassion. She said, up until the moment the kids get in the car. And then all of it goes out the window. And then it's like they're bickering and they're fighting and they're asking all the questions. And then it's dinner and bath and bedtime and homework and like the chaos. And I said to her very compassionately, I said, it's my assumption that you became a parent by choice. And you knowingly invited this chaos into your life. And even if it's loud and messy and dirty and hectic, it's also temporary. And one day your house is going to be really, really quiet. And so even as we get stuck in these patterns of reactivity, we can also find gratitude for the awareness to just enjoy the noise, enjoy the messiness, enjoy our imperfections, enjoy, the little moments that we think we're going nuts, because those, they do pass.
I love that. Yeah, there's so much gratitude for how much our children are showing up for us.
Yeah.
The fact that they remind us of what's possible each and every day. But I do have to share from my perspective that gratitude practice is really difficult to do when you're in the storm, when you're in the thick of things. Like, I'll never forget running multiple businesses, being up through the night. I had 2 children, one who was dealing with deep anxiety because of what I was carrying, and the other had club feet. So between them, I was up probably 11 to 15 times throughout the night,
Oh,
and
my
in between
goodness.
working. So I was on 2 to 3 hours of sleep. And when people told me to be grateful, I thought, no way. This gratitude and happiness story that you guys have going on here, very much in the Western Hemisphere, I thought, this is not going to work for me right now. And that's when I realized that I had to really go deeper to understand what was keeping me from even coming into.
There was a huge resistance there.
Because it went way huge resistance, because I wasn't living a life that was true to me. So I think a lot of us, if I can share from us surveying hundreds of parents over the years as well, we've learned that many of us have had children as a part of this framework of success. And that's a really difficult thing to share, especially publicly. But it's very much a truth. It was a truth for me. I won't deny it, that I thought this is just what I do. I get the job and I have the partner and I get the house and the cars and the fancy vacations, and the next comes kids. That was the trance that I was in. And that's very much what society is geared towards. How many people have the white picket fence and will do anything to keep that alive and get the perfect Instagram photos? But it's, again, of no fault of their own that they believe that that's what they have to do in order to come into that joy or connection that we so deeply desire. We just simply don't know how. So I love that you're inviting that in. But for those who are listening and can't quite get there, I have a lot of compassion for you as well, listeners.
Yeah.
I've been in a place where I wasn't able to invite the gratitude in.
Yeah, it's a practice. That's why it's a practice.
Yeah, and it goes much deeper. So,
Ashley, I feel like I could talk to you for hours and we could just keep going and going. But how can people find you? What's the best way for people to connect?
Yeah, thank you for asking. So our website, raisinghumanity.com, has our programs shared. It has our social media communities. On Facebook, we're at Raising Humanity Village. Instagram, we're Raising Humanity. And we also have our community events listed there as well. Those have only been taking place in Vancouver, British Columbia, within Canada for the last year. But now we are building out an ambassadors community around the world.
Amazing.
So by next year, you will start to see these community charitable events taking place, hopefully in your local community.
Amazing.
For you to come into deeper connection. So,
Ashley, you're doing such important work in the world. Thank you so much for sharing the gifts of what your own journey has brought for you and what you know can bring to many others, and for coming on today and sharing your time and wisdom with all of us. In deep gratitude to you.
Yes, thank you.
And I wish you much success on all the upcoming programs. And I know all the people in attendance will definitely experience some beautiful transformations.
Thank you, Jory. Thanks for having me. I really, really appreciate it.
Thank you so much.
To continue your journey forward, find Jory Rose on Facebook and Instagram to become part of her growing community. You can also gain access to her meditations, books, online classes, or to sign up for an upcoming retreat. Visit her at joryrose.com. That's JOREEROSE.com.